Most people never realize the day they start building wealth, because it doesn't happen when they get a raise, and it doesn't even happen when their portfolio finally hits $10,000. It happens much earlier. It happens the moment they stop asking, "How much money can I make?" and start asking, "How can my money make more money?" That sounds like a small shift. It isn't. It's the difference between someone who spends the next 20 years chasing a paycheck and someone who slowly builds financial freedom. Financial psychologists have studied this exact shift, the point where someone stops thinking paycheck to paycheck and starts thinking in systems is a measurable turning point, not just a feeling. That's why your first $10,000 is so important. Not because it's a life-changing amount of money, but because reaching it quietly changes the way you think and the decisions you make for years afterward. And once that happens, building wealth stops feeling like luck and starts feeling like a system. So why does this one milestone have such a powerful effect on almost every successful investor? To answer that, we have to start with a mistake almost everyone makes before they ever open a brokerage account. Chapter 1. The defensive trap. The mistake almost everyone makes has nothing to do with investing. It starts long before they ever open a brokerage account. Think about the first paycheck you ever earned. It probably didn't feel like much, but it felt exciting. For the first time, you had money that was completely yours. And almost immediately, that money already had somewhere to go. Rent, groceries, student loans, a subscription you forgot you were even paying for. Without realizing it, most people spend their entire financial life playing defense. Every dollar they earn already has a job before it even reaches their bank account. So when someone says, "You should invest your first $10,000, it sounds almost impossible. Not because people don't understand investing, but because they never feel like they have enough left over to begin. That's the first psychological barrier. We naturally believe we'll start investing after life becomes easier, after the promotion, after next year. The problem is, life keeps giving us another after. Income goes up, expenses quietly follow. Financial psychologists call this lifestyle inflation. The more we earn, the more our spending quietly expands to match it. A pricier gym membership, weekend trips that weren't in the plan. None of these decisions seem irresponsible on their own. But together, they leave us asking the same question every month. Where did my money go? This is why reaching your first $10,000 is so difficult. Not because $10,000 is an impossible number, because saving and investing consistently requires you to do something most people struggle with. Choosing tomorrow over today, again and again and again. That's exactly why this milestone changes people. By the time someone invests their first $10,000, they've usually spent years building habits that most people never develop. They've learned to ignore short-term temptations. They've learned to think beyond next month. And here's the interesting part. The account may show $10,000, but that's not your biggest asset anymore. The real trophy isn't the number in the account. It's the version of you disciplined enough to leave it alone. Because once you've built that kind of discipline, the next $10,000 feels completely different. And that's where everything begins to change. Not in your portfolio, but in the invisible system you've built around your money. The question is, what exactly changes after that? The answer isn't what most people expect.
Chapter 2. The biggest surprise isn't that your account reaches $10,000. It's what happens the day after. You wake up, open your investment app, and for the first time, your portfolio doesn't feel like an experiment anymore. It feels real. That might not sound important, but psychologically, it's a massive shift. Before your first $10,000, every contribution feels like you're trying to fill an empty bucket. You deposit a few $100s. The number barely moves. A good month in the market doesn't seem to change much. It's easy to wonder, is any of this even making a difference? That's exactly why so many people quit too early. Not because investing failed, because progress feels invisible. But after your first $10,000, something begins to change. A 5% gain doesn't just feel like another percentage. Now it represents real money. A dividend payment finally looks like more than pocket change. For the first time, you begin to see your money producing visible results, and that's incredibly motivating. Behavioral economists have long observed that visible progress encourages people to stay committed to long-term goals. When people can actually see momentum, they're far more likely to continue the behavior that created it. Investing is no different. Your first $10,000 often becomes proof that your system works, proof that all those ordinary decisions you've been making weren't wasted, and confidence changes behavior. People often assume confidence comes before action. In reality, it works the other way around. You act first and the confidence follows. The investor who has consistently built a $10,000 portfolio doesn't suddenly become smarter overnight. They become calmer, because uncertainty starts feeling familiar instead of frightening. Market drops still happen. Negative headlines still appear. But instead of asking, "Should I quit?" many investors begin asking, "Is this another opportunity to keep building?" That's a completely different mindset. The goal quietly shifts. You're no longer obsessed with making quick money. You're focused on building a larger asset that can continue working for years. And that's one of the biggest turning points in investing. Your paycheck slowly stops feeling like your only source of financial progress. Now there's another engine quietly running in the background: your investments. Some months they'll grow. Some months they'll fall. But over long periods, broadly diversified investments have historically grown despite many setbacks, although future returns are never guaranteed. That realization changes something deeper than your portfolio. It changes your relationship with time. Instead of hoping next month changes your life, you begin thinking about where you'll be 5, 10, or 20 years from now. And once your time horizon changes, almost every financial decision starts changing with it. You spend differently. You invest differently. Not because someone forced you to, but because you finally understand something most people don't. Money grows fastest when it's given time to work uninterrupted. But there's another change that almost nobody talks about. It has nothing to do with your investment account. It has everything to do with the opportunities that suddenly begin showing up once you've proven, to yourself, that you can build wealth consistently. Chapter 3. The biggest change after your first $10,000 isn't what appears on your investment statement. It's what starts happening inside your mind. For years, money felt like something you had to protect. Every unexpected expense felt like a setback. Every paycheck felt like a reset button. But after investing your first $10,000, something quietly changes. You stop thinking only about surviving this month and start thinking about building the next 10 years. That shift is more powerful than most people realize, because the way you think determines the opportunities you notice. The exact same financial headline can trigger two completely different reactions. One person immediately asks, "What if I lose money?" Another asks, "What if this is a chance to buy a great investment at a better price?" The market hasn't changed. The headline hasn't changed. The difference is the investor. This is one reason experienced investors often stay calmer during market volatility. It's not because they enjoy seeing prices fall. It's because they've learned that short-term movements don't always reflect long-term value. That perspective isn't built overnight. It's earned through experience. And your first $10,000 is often the milestone where that experience starts becoming real. You also begin asking different questions. Instead of, "How much can I spend?" you start asking, "How much can I invest?" The question shifts from, "Can I afford this?" to, "What's the opportunity cost if I buy this?" That's a question wealthy people ask all the time. Not because they're afraid to spend money, but because they understand that every dollar has more than one possible future. You can spend it once, or you can invest it and give it the chance to create even more dollars over time. Neither choice is automatically right or wrong, but once you've experienced your money growing for you, you begin seeing those trade-offs everywhere. Suddenly, a small, unnecessary purchase isn't just its price tag, it's the future growth you gave up. A market correction isn't automatically bad news. It may also be a chance to buy quality investments that lower prices, provided they still fit your long-term plan. This is why the first $10,000 matters so much. Not because it makes you wealthy, but because it teaches you to think like someone who's building wealth. And that mindset compounds just as powerfully as money does. every smart decision makes the next smart decision a little easier. Every month you stay consistent reinforces the habits that got you here. That's how ordinary investors slowly become confident long-term investors. Not through one brilliant investment, but through hundreds of small choices that keep pointing in the same direction. And once those habits become automatic, something even more interesting begins to happen. You stop relying entirely on your paycheck to feel financially secure. Because for the first time, you know you have another engine quietly running in the background. And that changes the way you look at your future forever. Chapter 4. The Pressure-Free Asset. The biggest misconception about wealth is that it's measured by how much money you have. It isn't. It's measured by how much pressure your money takes off your life. Think about someone who earns a high income but spends almost everything they make. Every month starts from zero. Every paycheck already has a destination. If that paycheck stops, their lifestyle immediately changes. Now think about someone else. They may not earn dramatically more, but they've spent years building investments that quietly grow in the background. Those investments won't pay all their bills overnight, but they do something just as important. They create options. And options are one of the greatest forms of financial freedom. The freedom to say no to a job that makes you miserable. The freedom to take time off without feeling trapped. None of those things happen because you suddenly became rich. They happen because your money slowly stopped relying entirely on your time. That's the real milestone hidden behind your first $10,000. For the first time, your financial future isn't being built only by the hours you work this week. It's also being helped by decisions you made months or even years ago. That's a completely different way to live. Warren Buffett once said, "If you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die." People often hear that quote and imagine complicated businesses or expensive real estate, but Buffett's point was much simpler. Money should eventually become a productive asset, not just something that sits in a checking account waiting to be spent. That doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small investments, consistent contributions, and enough time for those decisions to build on one another. This is why your first $10,000 matters far beyond its dollar value. It's proof that you've started creating an asset instead of simply collecting income. Income pays today's bills. Assets help pay tomorrow's bills. The difference seems small in the beginning. Over decades, it becomes enormous. This is also where many people finally stop comparing themselves to everyone else, because they realize wealth isn't a race against strangers. It's a process of making slightly better financial decisions than the person you were yesterday. A little more patience, a little more discipline. Those improvements rarely make headlines, but they quietly transform financial lives. And that's the part social media almost never shows. It shows luxury, it shows massive investment gains. It rarely shows the years of ordinary decisions that made those moments possible. By the time your first $10,000 is invested, you've already begun building something much more valuable than a portfolio. You've built a system that keeps working even on the days when you're not thinking about it. And once you have a system, wealth stops feeling like something you have to chase. It becomes something you patiently build. Because in the end, the greatest change after you invest your first $10,000 isn't your money. It's the fact that you've stopped depending on luck and started depending on a process. Final chapter. The number was never the point. So, does everything really change after you invest your first $10,000? Not overnight. Your life won't suddenly look different the next morning. You won't wake up financially free. You won't become wealthy because of one number. But something far more important begins to change: the direction of your life. Think about everything we've covered. The first $10,000 wasn't difficult because the number itself was special. It was difficult because of what it demanded from you. Patience, discipline, the willingness to think years ahead instead of just weeks. Those are the qualities that quietly create wealth. The money simply becomes proof that you've built them. Two people can earn the same salary, live in the same city, and still end up with completely different financial futures. One spending every dollar as quickly as it arrives, the others slowly building assets that keep working long after the paycheck has been deposited. At first, the difference is almost invisible. Then, one day, it isn't. People often look at someone who's financially successful and assume they discovered a secret, a better investment, a lucky break. Most of the time, what they're actually seeing is years of ordinary decisions finally becoming visible. That's how compounding works. It stays quiet for a long time. Then it surprises everyone who wasn't paying attention. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Your first $10,000 doesn't change your future because of what it buys. It changes your future because of what it teaches you. It teaches you that consistency beats intensity, that wealth is usually built before anyone else notices. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing shortcuts. You stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. You stop asking, how fast can I get rich? And you start asking a much better question. What decisions can I make today that my future self will thank me for? Because that's how real wealth is built. Not in one extraordinary year, but in hundreds of ordinary months. Not through perfect market timing, but through staying invested long enough for time to do its job. So if you're still working towards your first $10,000, don't underestimate what you're really building. You're not just growing an investment account. You're building the habits, the discipline, and the mindset that make every milestone after it easier to reach. And if you've already crossed that milestone, don't stop now. Because history has shown that for long-term investors, the first $10,000 is often the hardest. What comes next isn't guaranteed. Markets will rise. Markets will fall. But if you continue following the same principles that got you here, you'll no longer be relying on hope. You'll be relying on a system. And in the end, systems almost always outperform excitement. Because in the end, the biggest thing that changes after you invest your first $10,000 isn't your money. It's what you had to build inside yourself to get there. And that's an investment no market can ever take away.